Hello, and greetings from the Mirror Zone. I'm Bryce Skidmore.
And I'm David Leskin.
And we're here to talk about some more science fiction. Doing part 2 of our Japanese science fiction.
We're reading from the best Japanese science fiction stories edited by John L. Apostolou and Martin H. Greenberg.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff, good stuff. What was it? Today we're doing Tensei Kono's Triceratops, translated by David Lewis. And and before we get into it, it's good to be back.
It's very good to be back. I can feel my vocal cords adjusting to send out all these good vibes.
Now, after a crazy couple months of just broken computers, missed deadlines, and I got a book coming out pretty soon, which is going to be fun. So I'll probably drop that later. The Gardener in the Pit, coming to an Amazon near you.
I'm pretty excited about this, and we'll definitely drop a notification once that's available.
Hells yeah. So to the task at hand.
Yes.
This is our first Tensei Kono story?
It might be one of our only Tensei Kono stories, considering what we were able to actually find in terms of English translation, right?
Yeah, no, he's apparently this is the most translated work that he's had into English, which is really good story. I really enjoyed it.
I really enjoyed it too, and we both read this a few times now, and there's just so much more to discover about it each time, so we're really excited to be sharing this.
Yeah. Just a little bit on the author, and I do mean just a very little bit.
It's a little bit.
It's just a tiny bit. According to Wikipedia, Tensei Kono was born on January 27th of 1935, and he died on January 29th, 2012. He was a Japanese science fiction writer, and among other works, he has written Triceratops. Nothing in most English sources will tell us if he's written anything else.
Nope, and we did pretty thorough searches. It's 7-8 pages in, you're like, okay, so it's the same copy and pasted information over and over again.
Yeah, it's really depressing. So if anyone else out there wants to get on telling us who Tensei Kono is, I'd be super down.
Yeah, please add us.
Was it one of his stories that he wrote did become a film? In 1964, his story was adapted into a film called Black Sun, which is about an American military officer who's hiding out in Japan, and he I guess befriends a young Japanese boy, and who's really into jazz, and it's about their sort of lost in translation humor and post-war racism in Japan.
And we actually watched a portion of this film on YouTube clip, and we also watched the trailer as well. And we're looking forward in a future episode, maybe a mini episode, to discussing the film a little bit.
Yeah, I would really love to. Just the bits that we saw looked really good.
Yeah, I enjoyed it immensely.
So yeah, that's our guy. Do you want to do plot synopsis, or should I?
Yeah, I'll do plot synopsis. Sure. Triceratops is the story of a father and son who begin to notice a Triceratops walking across the street. They head home and tell their mother and wife about this, to very little belief, and as they continue to bike and search the area around them, they realize that there's some sort of leak in time that's allowing them to view not just one Triceratops, but a whole herd of them that regularly live in the area, sleep in their house and garage. They don't interact with the Triceratops, but they can see and even smell it sometimes.
Yeah.
And sort of the whole story is them, the father and son, growing together through this shared experience that they have and seeing what happens to the Triceratops.
Mm. Yeah, no, just the kind of bonding that only comes when you share an experience with one other person that no one else can.
It reminds me a lot of what I like about a lot of Stephen King books, where you have this supernatural element that unites two people, and that's the narrative lens of the story. And I think it's It's really successful in this one.
No, actually, I hadn't even considered while reading it, but that's like a really great example of just like sort of the heartfeltness that the story creates.
There's genuine heart to a lot of this story. I mean, you will believe a Triceratops can die.
Yeah.
But seriously, there's a lot of points where I felt very connected to both the main characters and the dinosaurs that we were saying.
Yeah. No, and but it doesn't all go well though, does it?
It does not. Eventually, this group of herbivores is set upon by a hunting pack of Tyrannosaurus Rex that wipes them out. And I mean, it's pretty bad on both sides. The Triceratops definitely get away from, some of them at least, are managed to hobble away, but it's a slaughter.
Yeah.
And the dad and the son are pretty much the only witnesses to this. Everyone else on the streets around them, either through on purpose or because they're unable to or want to see what's happening, they don't witness the bloodshed. So they're basically like the only viewers of this murder.
Well, and it's interesting too that you bring up Stephen King, because it kind of like that last scene kind of reminds me of the scene from It.
Yeah.
Where it's like, so in the end of this story, there's that huge fight, the Tyrannosaurs come down and they kill a whole herd of the Triceratops, and just blood gets everywhere. And there's a description of a woman who's walking through it and like doesn't see that around her, but like has some of it splashed on her clothes. And it's that thing like where like, it comes to attack Bev and the whole bathroom's covered in blood, but like Dad doesn't see it because the town is like blinded to it.
Yeah, and this definitely channels that same sort of idea that these two people are the sole viewers of what's transpiring and understand truly what's happening.
So yeah, now there's a good story. Shall we? Do you want to do some analysis? Do you want to get into quotes?
Let's start with some quotes.
I'm down.
Yeah, did you have one you wanted to do? A funny thing happened on the way home. A dinosaur crossed our path. It was a day when yellow sand blown from the continent filled the air and turned the sun the color of blood, a harsh, unpleasant day.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this story has that sort of feel to it, is like the idea of something blowing in, a change, something that changes everything. And it's part of what starts this magical story, the idea, the father and the son, they see a dinosaur cross their path, and it opens their eyes and their minds to the point that they start seeing these dinosaurs everywhere.
Yeah. No, it's like, I love that idea of just like, just the day being harsh and unpleasant.
Yeah.
No, and it's because of obviously what's to come, not like what is in that moment. Because like initially it's just shock, but it's like also the nonchalantness with which it's thrown out. Just a funny thing happened on the way home. A dinosaur crossed our path.
Right, and I mean it sums up a lot of the themes in this story. The idea of the mundane and the magic happening one along the side of each other, neither one given preference.
Yeah, no, and it's like, and I think that it is because it works out in the mechanics of how they're seeing them already. But it's like that's like a perfect way to attack this story.
Right.
After they see the Triceratops, they're quite obviously seeing the Triceratops, and then Dad's trying to like sort of reason their way out of that. It says, "Well, it hardly matters. There was a little earthquake, and then that thing went zipping by, so we got a good shock out of it. Maybe the shadows threw us off. Maybe it looked bigger than it was. All that's really certain is that it wasn't a dog or a pig or some animal like that, but a really big rascal, right?" Like, which I love that, where it's like, it was obviously a Triceratops, but like, he's just trying to be like, well, it wasn't that, it was something.
Right, maybe it was a rhino that was loose, but if a rhino was loose, it would already be on the news. Well, maybe they haven't put it on the news yet.
And it is such a funny little back and forth where they're just arguing over whether or not they just saw a dinosaur, but not even really arguing.
No, they saw a dinosaur. They're just trying to figure out how to deal with it. It was on one of those days, yet another Sunday evening, when they had gone cycling about the neighborhood, though not as far as on the day they first met Triceratops. After passing through the copse on the top of the hill and coming out above their subdivision, the father and son came to a stop, finding themselves speechless and unable to move. A Triceratops huddled superimposed over every house in the town, their skin brilliant green beneath the mercury lamps gently rising and falling with their breathing. Occasionally one would open its eyes in a narrow slit, and every time the lids raised, the pupils would glitter in a brilliant rose, perhaps because of rhodospin pigment like that found in some species of crocodile. It was a scene of phantasmal beauty like the winking of giant fireflies.
That was so cool.
I really like this quote, and if you want to pair this one with another one so we can kind of drive it home, do you want to do the one about the explanation over why they're seeing these things?
I would. It's a Triceratops, isn't that right, Dad? Triceratops, it means three-horned dinosaur. The nose horn and two on its forehead, that makes three, right? Then it's a Triceratops. Triceratops, living and fighting again in an endless struggle for survival in the late Cretaceous, Mesozoic world 70 million years before, domain of history's most savage beast, the carnivorous monster Tyrannosaurus rex. Triceratops, that massive herbivore, possessing the most powerful armament of any animal ever known. Triceratops, that Triceratops, was even now walking leisurely down the road right before their eyes.
It is really good world building for the story.
It is, and it's like, and it's in terms of the explanation for how that stuff got there. I've read about, and this is the sun talking. I've read about dimensional faults and stuff like that. The sun said, but those are all just theories. Theories? When you say something that you can't prove might be this way or that, that's a theory. So there aren't any dimensional faults? Well, someone just thought them up. They might really exist, and they might not. If you figure they exist, then the surface of this wall must be right about the fault line between our world and the world of the Triceratops 70 million years ago. But really, you can try explaining it just about any way you please. For instance, you could think that our world and the Triceratops world exist simultaneously, instead of popping in and out of the fault line every now and then. We're really both here all the time, with just a bit of lag in between. That would explain why we can somehow look through into that other world, and they can't look through onto us. It'd be just that fine a difference.
I love that quote.
Me too.
You've already got this great setup where, I mean, you could imagine this in a lot of other stories. Kid and dad see dinosaur, and there's really no explanation for it. It's just been, fantastic wonder. But from this, you get the explanation from the characters within the universe.
Yeah.
And boy, what a concept. All of time is simultaneous. In the middle of this little kid's story, it's... I really love the concept. It's a great sci-fi concept.
No, I love it, and it's like, it speaks to me on these two levels, where it's like, on the one level, there's this aspect of complete coexistence, which I always find interesting. Like, in science fiction, approaches coexistence in very fun ways, but like, in this particular one where it's like, these two things existing in the same space, but 70 million years apart.
Right.
And it's like, just to have that awareness, like, of your space and its history, like, it's very profound, and I think can be very subversive.
It is very subversive, and I think that, what's a child to think when they're kind of going through all this? It's wonderful that he has the dad to kind of give him, each other, for both of them to be able to give this sort of perspective and how they're perceiving it and be able to experience it together.
Yeah. No, it's like, they can experience and they learn together. I love that, and I love that too, where it's like it's also that quote is also wonderful to me because it's sort of a weird science fiction writer's nudge where it's like, don't fucking question it too hard. There are dinosaurs here.
Maybe it's this and maybe it's that, but the end result is whatever you think it is. Dinosaurs are here. Exactly,
and I think what's even more interesting is like, and the end result is that's not the important thing isn't how we did it. The important thing is how are we going to deal with this.
Right, and that's what the book deals with, the story.
I also love that, as they go on, like, sort of just going out and, like, experiencing life around these things, the mom's constantly just like, there's something weird that you two are up to, and they're just both like, oh, it's nothing.
Can I read a quote that ties along with that? The one about why other people are not seeing or believing what they see?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So can they see it too, just like us? Maybe, but you know how people's heads are. We try to deny things that we think are impossible. It's a kind of protective instinct. So even if we somehow do see it or feel it, we usually just shut it out automatically, choose not to see it, not to do it. If we see it again 2-3 times maybe, common sense comes to the rescue and we laugh it off. Nerves, boy, what a crazy idea. And that's the end of it. And if it still doesn't stop, then people stop accepting you. You can't live a productive social life anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they get a little bit of that with their mom, who's the only person they tell about it, because, just from her reaction alone, I think they know they really can't share this with anybody else.
No, it's very much like this is a secret that they both have to keep, and it's like even in the darker level of it's like they won't be understood. Like people will think you're crazy, and it's a thing that's fucked up because it's like they're not crazy. They just see more.
Right. Whatever people think of them, those dinosaurs do exist alongside, maybe not in time, but in place, and all that really matters is the two people who acknowledge it.
Yeah.
In the story, at any rate.
The father and son often saw dinosaurs after that. Sometimes, glancing up at the sunset, they'd see the shadow of a huge winged creature like a pteranodon weaving across the sky. But the only earth-hugging dinosaurs they saw were Triceratopses. Apparently, the local habitat was best suited to Triceratopses. The beast asleep in the garage, its head so perfectly aligned with the family car that it seemed a strange horned automobile, was snoring humorously away, the huge dinosaur passing over the head of a small child crying fretfully by the roadside. All these apparitions were Triceratopses.
I really wish this story had been adapted into a movie or a TV show. This would be a delight to see, wouldn't it?
It really would, and it's funny to me because it's like usually people like fleeing dinosaurs, but the thing that would be hilarious about this is just watching them just like walk around a child throwing a fit, and it's like not about a dinosaur.
Yep. Yeah, and meanwhile, a dinosaur sleeping in their garage.
There's also that one joke that was in here where it's like, I'm not going to quote it exactly, but I love it, where it's like the father and son realize that they have to sort of like keep it under wraps that they're seeing dinosaurs, but like, and the dad would be like, go to your room. And he's like, I can't. Triceratops' butt's in there.
I guess you'll just have to live with it.
Yeah, it's like, dude, whatever. And it's like, but that's the one thing that we get from this weird metaphysical crossover is that the smells don't go away.
No, no, they don't. I gotta lie. I'm not gonna lie. I would probably want to switch rooms too if I was smelling dinosaur. But
yeah, that sounds horrible.
The logistics of this are really great that they go into.
No, it's like it really is like a wonderfully built little reality that it's like, I wasn't a fan of the last Jurassic Park or Jurassic World film. This already sounds like a better idea for Jurassic World.
Easily. Like, the threat in Jurassic Park over and over is like, life's gonna find a way, and when it finds a way, it's just gonna like come and eat kids and stuff. That's pretty much all we're getting, over and over again. And this story kind of likes to imagine this cohabitation, which is a lot more interesting and fun.
Yeah. No, and I would rather, like, that's kind of the Jurassic hashtag my Jurassic World is just
right. My Jurassic World is Dinotopia.
Oh fuck yeah! I haven't thought about Dinotopia in forever. But
it's been a while. But this definitely evokes a lot of the same feelings as Dinotopia, I think.
That really had such great art in it.
Some of the best art. I need to go back and read Dinotopia again. Okay, so we already showed that throughout the town now, the dad and the son are seeing Triceratops everywhere. And we've basically found out that the Triceratops were following the water, but they were not the only dinosaurs following the water.
Yeah.
They were also Tyrannosaurus Rex following them. And that's where my quote starts. The fighting lasted throughout the night. Even at the height of the raucous laughter of a televised singing contest, the father and son could hear the war cries, could feel the thick hide splitting, the shrieks of the hour of death. By morning, the combat had almost ended, and the countless corpses of Triceratops and Tyrannosaurus, some still barely twitching the tips of their tails, some dragging the ripped tatters of their stomachs, lay tumbled across the landscape. Almost without exception, the corpses of Triceratops had their entrails dug out, their ribs laid bare, and their neck shields chopped into ribbons. But most of the Tyrannosauruses showed only deep puncture wounds in their necks and bellies, escaping utter destruction. There were even a few scattered survivors, but none had escaped unscathed. All had lost the energy to keep on fighting. This quote comes as we've been sort of coasting along on this fantasy of this whole story.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get a little bit more into this in analysis, but the reason I love this quote so much is up until now, we've sort of been dealing with this fun father and son coming of age story.
Yeah.
And the coming of age part hadn't really come yet, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is the corpse found in, to go back to Stephen King's Stand By Me.
Yeah.
This is kind of the inciting event that I would assume makes the son grow up and kind of changes his worldview a little bit, but it also shows us, the readers, the consequence of having this sight to be able to see the dinosaurs' time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not all herbivores, it's also a struggle for survival.
Yeah.
And they witness the murder of all of these, what they'd consider to start becoming at least the landscape, if not more important to them than that.
Yeah.
It's really very arresting.
No, and there's an aspect of it too that's like that really like jumped out at me, and we were talking about this earlier, where it was like I read this and I was like, I don't see really the war in this very much, like, and I thought, maybe this is like one of those stories that I could like not relate to the war, but there was this one part of it where it was that even at the height of the ruckus laughter of a televised singing contest, the father and the son could hear the war cries, could feel the thick hide splitting, and the shrieks of the hour of death. So like this thing where it's like we could sit in home and watch TV, but there's a war outside.
Right,
and they have to be quiet about it.
And we talked about this a little before starting the podcast, but it brings in this idea of, if we're talking about Japanese stories that take place, this is 1974 particularly, you're talking about the effects of the war and Western influence and how citizens perceive that. And I mean, this is a pretty good metaphor for that, is, the destruction was underneath the whole time. The war was raging, but they couldn't see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just behind this veil.
Right.
That only a few people could look through.
Right, and you definitely, it makes you think a lot how, I'm sure this dad and son are probably never going to be watching these programs that they talk about. Again, they're always going to be out in the world looking for things that no one else can see. They can't unsee this.
Yeah.
They're never going to be distracted again, and they're never going to want to be.
No, totally. And actually, do you mind if I jump on just a little bit after that?
Do it.
This is below him sprawled the body of one of his comrades, a gaping hole horned through his neck, its body clotted with dried blood. While no more than 5 meters away, a Triceratops grazed silently on the grass, blood still dripping from one of its eyes. Every now and then the Tyrannosaurus would raise its head and glare, though perhaps this was only their fancy, balefully at the grazing Triceratops. If you eat that crud, why'd you kill us? The father and son almost felt that they could hear that voice. If there's too much to eat, why did you keep on butchering us? The Triceratops's unbloodied eyes seemed to ask that back.
I love that quote, and definitely I'm seeing more overarching themes about war. Like, if you take away Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops and you replace that with soldiers, it fits pretty well.
No, it's like, and I love that too, where it's like this thing where these two animals locked in this mortal combat that kill each other, and one asks, like, you don't even eat meat, why did you kill us? And it's like, you already ate, why were you butchering us? Like, the unanswerable questions of violence.
Yeah, and of course those questions come in the aftermath of the battle with the blood everywhere. They don't ask those questions before going into that, do they?
No. And of course the only people who got to deal with it were the ones who looked on. Because immediately after they sort of go in the minds of the Triceratops and T-Rex as they're dying. This quote, the father and son watched as they walked slowly to the station. The corpses that weren't dripping were at least tolerable, but even they were brought up short, where the large intestines of a Tyrannosaurus lay heaped across the road, as if they had sprung writhing from the animal's torn open belly. After a moment's pause, they edged on by the side of the street. A woman in fashionable white socks passed through a blood-smeared landscape, her shoes clicking loudly, her eyes suspicious, watching father and son. A microbus filled with kindergartners passed through that landscape, bearing its load of lively chatter. An elementary school student passed through that landscape, singing a jingle. Skylark dancing to the sky. God is reigning in the sky. The world's a trifle.
Great way to end this story.
Yeah. And I love that visual though, where it's like this woman who's like wearing the white, and it's like it gets stained, but like father and son, like they're trying to like keep away, like they edge up on a sidewalk against a wall to try and like not step in the entrails.
Right.
And everyone's just looking at them like they're crazy.
Right.
Like this woman is like.
This is why I also kind of wish that this had been adapted visually, but even so, without that, the descriptions of the story are really good. You're just seeing this woman as they're trying to avoid the viscera, and she's all in white. It should be easily ruined by the gore around her. She's just walking right through it like it's nothing.
Yeah.
And a bunch of kindergartners too. They're right there, and they're happy. They're singing their tunes, and they're all oblivious to the horror.
Yeah. No, and it's like I love that. Like the last line of the story is that like one of the children singing, the world's a trifle." It's like it's not. The world is nothing.
Life is but a dream.
Yeah. No, and that's what we got for Tensei Kono's Triceratops.
Do you want to do a little analysis?
I would love to. What were you thinking? What strikes you?
I definitely wanted to go into. We touched on this a little bit before, but what are the themes of this story? You know what I mean? And we definitely discussed like being open to the reality of a situation also opens you up to the beauty and the horror of it.
Yeah.
It's not something that you can close up, and with that you come with the knowledge of learning about loss. And I think this story did a really good job of at least from that angle, the coming of age story angle.
Yeah. And I think it was, and it's like the one thing that complicates it a little that I actually super enjoy is that I feel like it's both the father and son coming of age.
Yes.
Where it's like, it's still not too late for dad to like get a little whimsy, like, and I think that's interesting because if this movie was made in America, and in fact this movie has been made in America in some sense where a child sees a dinosaur,
sure,
and the adults don't believe them because it's their innocent child minds that can do this, but it's like, no, dad can see it too.
Right. Like, and the reason he can see it is because in some sense I think they were both bonding. I think that's my opinion anyway, is that their bond is what allowed them to both see that. And the story makes it clear that in the beginning of the story they're coming from very different places. The dad is a little bit more tired than the son. He thinks he knows everything about life that the son doesn't know yet. Mm-hmm. And the son in his own way sort of thinks the same thing, that he knows everything, that the world makes sense to him, that he knows what's coming. And they do both have a coming of age moment, which kind of goes to tell you about, like, you're never too old to learn. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But I think that it's all very tied into that, the idea that they both have this realization at the same time that brings them closer, and as it brings them closer, it also opens both of their eyes more.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. It really does sort of amount to a father and a son actually seeing the world on the same page. There's a part of it that, like, this is going to sound horrible, but it's like, I'm just wondering now that the horrible downside of the second sight is visible. It's like, if the story were to continue, would you just keep seeing like primordial things rip each other apart?
That's what I've got to imagine. I've got to imagine that if we continued on with this story, that each one would be something like they witness other historical atrocities or just life going on, not even good or bad necessarily, but just different periods in time, and I don't think they can close themselves off to it anymore. I think that they would keep seeing this stuff.
Yeah. No, I think you're right too, because it's like they did keep seeing it, and they did like inch around it. Like, even in the moment, I feel like if there was a moment where it's like they would stop seeing it forever, it should have been that one, but they actually kept seeing it, so.
Right, and it fits more, I think, since they both agreed with what they were each talking about the idea of, well, you can go back to watching your shows and you can pretend none of this ever happened, and eventually your brain will make it so that you won't see it anymore. And that would have been the moment that they should have stopped seeing it if they were ever going to. I don't think that they can. And I think that that's a metaphor for something.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're right. Is there anything that this story would make you meditate upon?
Yeah, I still am not entirely sure whether this is a story about westernization and leaving old Japan behind and accepting new Japan. I've been struggling with this the entire time we've been trying to read it. I go back and forth. Sometimes I think it is, and sometimes I think it isn't. And I mean, we'd be silly to not take those things into account considering where and when this was written.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to just be injecting this was about the bomb and the war into every single thing. So,
yeah.
I mean, what were your views on it? Do you think that parts of that matched up?
Well, no, I think parts of it did. And actually, that's what's interesting to me is it's almost like, it's almost like this curveball that really weirdly Jurassic Park also throws you. When you bring in something like dinosaurs, it's like kind of an intense beat towards a form of nostalgia. But it's almost like ultimate nostalgia because you're nostalgic for a time that you weren't there.
Right.
You're fantasizing a lost world. That's going to give you some kind of like juvenile kick or like some kind of right. some form of childlike awe and wonderment that like these creatures are supposed to bestow, and they do that initially, but then the nostalgia bomb rips it apart because it's like you already have this tear in reality where you're seeing the sweet and then you have to see the not so sweet.
I like that.
And I think that there is an aspect where it's like where if it is of old Japan versus modernized and industrialized Japan, I think that it almost would be like it would almost be tearing that dichotomy apart because it's like even to be looking back on the past as a form of this like nostalgia that lets a T-Rex through.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what else you're going to let through when you try and get to that lost world, because it is an idealized version of something that never really existed or that you were never necessarily really a part of.
No, and it's like I love I would love to like learn more about Japanese to know if that word was translated specifically well, but the superimposed is a word that gets used I think more than once, and it's like the thing that makes this version of reality so beautiful and so like wonderful is that the objects in it are hollow to each other. That a dinosaur could look as though it's sleeping in your garage because that's where it happened to be sitting 65 million years ago.
Right, and it allows us as the readers to form a bond with both these characters that never existed and these animals that we've never met and make them both feel more real to us in the same way that they were feeling about the Triceratops.
Yeah. No, there's an aspect of this, it's probably the thing that I'm going to be meditating on the most, is it's really weird, this relationship between father and son, and it's like you brought this up where it's like, they're, every so often they each have to know more than the other, like, but the thing that I like the most is in the end, they both learn the same thing simultaneously, like, it becomes a learning experience, and I think I could look to have that in my own life, where it's like, I don't have to know everything, like, I can stop trying, or like other people could stop trying to do that and we can just like work together and like figure shit out together, because I feel like we can argue about, like people can argue about politics all we want, but like until we start doing a weird, okay, there's a Triceratops loose in the town, we can both agree we're seeing that, right? And then let's work from there.
Yeah, I really like that too, this idea of like the knowing.
Yeah.
It's not so much that anybody knows anything more than anybody else, it's that their knowing is different.
Yeah. And you can figure shit out together, and I think that there is a camaraderie based on this, like, that there is sort of like a unification that happens when two people can look unequivocally at the same thing and understand that they both saw it.
Yeah, and not just know that they both saw it, but acknowledge that to each other.
Yeah.
And build something from that.
And it's a strength, and I would actually think that regardless of how bloody this story ended, that I feel like this father-son are probably going to have an amazing relationship later in life.
I'm really hopeful about both of them. I think that in the same way that a lot of, like, we were talking before about how kids will see ghosts or dinosaurs in other movies or TV shows, and no one will believe them because they're the adults, and this doesn't take the easy way out and do that. I think, like, the dad both of them being forced to acknowledge that they're seeing the same thing, sort of, it creates an extra reality. Mm-hmm. And we're kind of given a glimpse into that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to talk about or cover that came up for you while reading this?
Not really off the top of my head.
I think we did a pretty good job of covering it.
I think we did. It's weird. This is turning into our shortest episode.
Well, I mean, to be fair, these are short stories.
They are very short stories.
I think the story really accomplished what it set out to do, which is, this idea of forcing the reader to grow by seeing how the characters inside of it grow. I mean, that's really all, if you're boiling it down, that's what happened in this book, is we saw some people see something. If you're really cutting it down and condensing it. Yeah. But it's more the human relationships in the heart of the story that was what was so interesting.
Yeah, that's true, because nothing really in their realm happens. They just have a developing relationship.
Right, and those dinosaurs died a long time ago. Yeah. None of this is new to either of them.
And actually, that's the thing that's even worse, is that, to see these things as perpetual echoes, that there's no saving them.
Right, it's the same way as these short story characters. You know what I mean? Like you said, I'm sure they're going to have a great life together, but all we get to see is what's played out in this story, nothing more beyond the borders. Mm-hmm. And whatever you take from that is your own lessons that you learned.
Yeah. So, do you want to do related reading?
Let's do it. Let me start. So, do you remember the episode that we did of Dark They Were?
Yes.
I want to recommend that one if we're talking about the idea of loss of innocence. I think that's a real good one. If you haven't gone back and listened to that one yet, high recommend on that one.
Yeah, definitely. And it's and I love it too, because it's it is a loss of innocence, but I almost want to put that in air quotes, because it's yes, I'm no longer a child because I know more, but it's it is that expansive understanding. It's stepping out of childhood.
Right, stepping out of childhood is just the first step to knowing, and even then you're not going to have the complete picture. It's going to take a lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, so Dark They Were, you want to check out, I don't remember which episode that was.
That was episode 1.
Excellent.
Our first episode.
Okay,
Go back and check out our first episode, you
please, guys. And then every other one too, until you get back up to this one.
Rate us on iTunes.
Yeah.
Write a review.
Yes. SoundCloud, whatever you want to do.
We accept cash.
I mean, I do. I don't report it, but I accept it.
Stuff it in an envelope.
Yeah. Meet on 34th Street. Make sure not to bring anybody with you.
I swear to God, if you're not wearing a bowler hat, I will not accept the money.
Yeah, and you have to say Mirror Zone, or we'll know that you're not in on it. I do want to do one more recommendation for this along similar lines, which was Pete's Dragon. The Disney film.
Nice.
I haven't seen the new one. I don't know if you have.
I have not. I was a big fan of the old one, though.
I'm a big fan of the old one.
I used to heat apples in the microwave because I was such a big fan of the old one.
Aw.
Heat them in the microwave, pretend I had a dragon roast it for me.
I love that. And now I'm going to have to go rewatch Pete's Dragon myself. It's just... That's one of those movies where we were talking about before, nobody initially believes the kid that there's a real dragon and it's not imaginary, but this dragon starts to get seen by other people as belief takes hold. And there's some great musical numbers in it that I think are pretty classic. There's a good portion of it that has the kid having a loss of innocence arc that's very similar to some of the ones we've discussed. Yeah, I think that's a high recommend for me. And I've probably also watched it 300 or 400 times, so don't let me sound biased at all, right?
Oh, it's a great flick. I always love the live-action cartoon crossovers from early Disney.
Yeah, I mean, aside from this story, if you want to go watch Bedknobs and Broomsticks and any other the really great live-action mixed animation Disney musicals,
yeah, no, it was
worth a watch.
It's completely, and this is a recommendation that I'm doing that's completely out of character because it's not for the story, but just go watch Bedknobs and Broomsticks. It's about a witch who fights Nazis.
It's about a witch who fights Nazis.
With fucking magic.
Yeah, and magic knights of armor.
It's so good.
It's really good, and it does actually have some overlaps with this story as well. There's a good portion of that as well that's about kids growing up and learning to accept reality and what's normal versus magic.
Yeah.
And it also has a lot of overlaps with Mary Poppins as well. A lot of these have similar ideas about childhood innocence.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I'm just gonna say fuck childhood, because you should, if you want to look at a story that has some similar elements to this, but if you want to focus on sort of the darker, more horrifying side of that, I would recommend From Beyond by H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh, high recommend on that one from me too.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And even the Stuart Gordon movie is really good also.
It's very good. That's another movie that was directed by the same director as. So that is Stuart Gordon, and it's also got
Jeffrey Combs is
Herbert
in
West himself.
Yeah, and it was her name Barbara, the woman who played.
I'm not gonna get that last name, not off the top of my head.
I'm not either. I'm gonna have to edit this later.
Yeah, we can totally put that in the notes or whatnot.
But anyways, no. So From Beyond is like it's a very similar deal where like there are these two guys, the mad scientist invites his friend over, and he's like, I want to show you this machine that will show you crazy colors and it'll stimulate a thing in your head. But when he turns it on, like he sees just this like crazy alien world and these things that are floating around him that look really menacing and horrifying. And the plot twist, they're actually there. They've been there this whole time because they're just in another dimension, but these dimensions like overlap on one another.
Right, and the only way people have been able to see it is through their pineal gland.
Mm-hmm.
What the nice twist about this is usually when you bring up the pineal gland and opening the third eye in, I don't know, not even science fiction, but just in literature in general, you're talking about a positive, transcendent experience. You're seeing angels or, aliens or something like that are, maybe if not necessarily beneficial, but they're not out to get you. And the truth in From Beyond is far more horrifying.
Yeah. They've
been here the whole time, and you're going to turn into one of them now that you've seen them.
Exactly. It's so good. But anyways, yeah, I'm gonna recommend that. I would also recommend. I would also like to recommend another Ray Bradbury to play us out. A Sound of Thunder, which is a really good story about time travelers going back to observe dinosaurs.
Yeah, it definitely bookends this story real well. There's a lot of things about, the butterfly effect. And
in fact, isn't that the first story that has the butterfly effect?
That's the butterfly effect story.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I could necessarily recommend the movie. It's a little schlocky, even though it's fairly recent. But you do definitely have the wonder of, you think life is normal, there's nothing interesting left to see? Well, how about you go check out some dinosaurs? But also, by observing, you're doing more than observing, you're changing things.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. Like, and any time you can bring the Heisenberg uncertainty principle into science fiction, I just love it when they bring like science into science fiction. It's not always super scientific, but it is fun.
I'd rather keep closer to Jurassic Park style aesthetic if you can. You know what I mean? Like, there's always room for more footnotes, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that would probably be the last recommend, but we're not even going to recommend because you've already seen it. Jurassic Park.
We talked about it a lot too.
Yeah. And it's like it seems like it really is just like with the nostalgia and with like and with just sort of the awe that comes with seeing the dinosaurs, that's probably the only aspects that Jurassic Park shares with this story.
Right. And if we're going to be really honest, this is just my opinion, but I think that the movie is more imbued with sort of the Steven Spielberg moment of awe. He injects a lot of those into the scene composition. And, like, sure, the book has that, but I think Michael Crichton gives a little bit, if we're talking about the balance of, like, awesome clinical science and pure wonder, I think he hews more on the side of science.
Yeah.
And the movie does a little bit more of that Spielberg magic.
No, it totally does, because it's like, I remember from the book, and it's honestly a thing I liked about the book was just talking about what a bitch it was to make these things, and, like, how they're kind of not right, or they're a little sick, because when you bring them into when you clone them and they live in our world 65 million years after when they were supposed to live, like the plant life is completely different, the oxygen composition and the atmosphere is completely different, so these animals are like, they're having trouble getting their like they can't shit right and they have trouble breathing. Like that's a deal with a lot of them.
Right, and I mean, it's definitely part of what he was trying to tell with that story was, like, realistically, you tried to bring dinosaurs to today, if you're using frogs and all this other kind of stuff, they're just not going to be the same things. Yeah. You're going to get that sense of wonder, but it was a bitch to accomplish, and we can't really sustain it for very long.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's our recommends. Anything else?
No, I think we covered it all, and I'll tell you what, listening to our podcast, it's It's way better than watching a show about people singing. I will say that, and ignoring all the dinosaurs around you.
Oh, for sure.
If there's anything we can say that, it's tune into our podcast and don't ignore the freaking dinosaurs in your garage.
No, you just give it a name. Be nice to it.
And don't smell its farts if you can help it.
We actually did I show you? We just recently brought a dinosaur into our home.
Did you?
We did. No, it's a T-Rex tapestry.
This is exciting.
I gotta show you because it's just the fucking best.
When you get an on-screen reaction. Amazing.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I can now actually picture this part of the story where the Tyrannosaurs are attacking really well.
I cannot wait to start doing YouTube videos in front of it.
You're like, I know you're paying attention to the dinosaur, but you're gonna try and listen to me if you can.
Oh my god, I'm gonna give her like a super femme name.
Like?
This is LaFonda, my Tyrannosaurus.
What? That's the name. You nailed it.
It's LaFonda. It's just that's my girl LaFonda.
So from me and you and everyone we know in
LaFonda,
a good night and good luck.
Have yourselves a good night, folks, and we will see you when next time we'll be talking about the legend of the paper spaceship.
It's going to be a real good one from beyond and through the mirror zone, so make sure you tune in for that, and also make sure that all of your paper airplanes and spitballs are stowed safely in the overhead compartment.
Because you might be going somewhere.
You might be going somewhere far through the mirror.
Hint, it's space.
It is space.
Good night, folks.
Take care.